It's noon. Boom. Libero Copper, LBC on the TSX-V. CEO Ian Harris is joining me today for a full update. It's been a while since we did this. LBC has been up to quite a bit in Colombia. Very large porphyry project in the south of the country, and they're drilling. So I want to go in chronological order here with Ian, just do a full rundown for people who might be new to the story and hearing it for the first time or maybe the second time. So Ian, what were some of the big accomplishments for the company in 2024?
Oh yeah, 2024 was a really big year for us. I have to admit 2023 was a little bit of a struggle. We were still working on having a strong platform to launch the project. But then Frank Guistra came in very early in the year, saw the potential of the project, and I think the team behind it came in, brought in sponsorship that really helped clean up the structure and the balance sheet, which wasn't very, very healthy at the time, and gave us the fuel that we needed to finish getting things organized on the ground. So then in October, we announced mobilization and then started drilling in November time period. Had some minor operational things, but there was a lot to do to get the camp back up and running. It is all man portable drills, so we don't use helicopters, and it's quite a hike to get to the top. Getting that all reestablished, but there was a lot of motivation and excitement in the air. I use a philosophy, believe in, I'm not here to drill out a project. I'm here to eventually build a mine, and building the political will, through extreme local strength and building a national reputation. And some of that really played out because very early we had a western boundary with a forestry reserve, and that boundary was redefined, which was a big, big moment. It helped really de-risk the project and really opens up the western side of the project. And then at the very beginning of the year, we put out the first results. And the reason why that's so exciting is because, Mocoa is a class A, near surface, large scale, good grade, porphyry deposit. And there's just so few of them, and so little, discoveries have been made. There's been a total lack of investment. We've squeaked what we can out of brownfield, projects. So the anticipation is that, Mocoa is an extremely valuable project and now is on a strong pathway to, move it forward. In January, we put out the first results. It was over 1,000 meters of mineralization from the top of the hole to the bottom of the hole. I don't think many people are used to seeing. They're used to seeing intercepts, et cetera, but this was an entire hole. We reported the entire hole, because it was mineralized from top to bottom. I'm looking forward to seeing all the intersects, and a compilation of all the copper intercepts. But if it was the first half of, 2024, it would have been one of the top copper only drill holes. So just not even considering the moly content in the project, one of the best holes in the world, right? And that's not a bad first hole. We're already drilling on our second hole. We're down almost 600 meters now. And it's focusing more on that western side because now, our larger drill program can focus on, it's all about getting, my internal goal is to try and get it, push it over that 1 billion ton mark. I think it's got a lot of leg room to go way above that, but I know that's a very important, psychological number. And having that ability to also work the west side, opens up our ability of where we can do that expansion drilling.
Okay, so let's talk about hole 44, because that was the first hole drilled in over 2 years at the project. So it was 1,144 meters of about, what was it, 0.42% copper equivalent?
That's great. Yeah, and that's top to bottom, right? So there's obviously some higher grade parts.
Or 0.46% copper equivalent. Yeah.
Yeah. We reported the entire hole top to bottom. That is the average grade of the entire hole.
Yeah, and so inside that, there's some higher grade portions, like 201 meters of 0.49% copper and 0.09% moly for a copper equivalent grade of 0.86%. So when you talk about 200 meters of 0.86% copper equivalent in the core of the porphyry, deposit, that's pretty high grade for a porphyry deposit, where we normally see grades around 0.3% copper. So what were your expectations going into hole 44? Because obviously this is not a step out hole. You were drilling through some known zones, but you're also testing some areas that hadn't been filled in previously.
Yeah, so let me get everybody's kind of mind around it. This is a eastern ridge line, and the majority of the drilling is on a western ridge line so it is a little bit of a step out, and it is going basically full north. So that other ridge line basically was a vertical hole, and then a west hole, and then an east hole. So there was a section of the hole that was we were near to known mineralization, right? The top section, and definitely the bottom section was all in new area. And the major purpose is we believe that there was a continuation of this core mineralization. It's actually a breccia zone that we have multiple of them, but they seem to be the feeder systems. And really, it was to be able to connect up the bottom of, there was some assumptions we had in our model that we wanted to confirm. The compelling question is, all of this connect up? Because that was an important question, considering the rest of our drilling at that time was based on expansion to the north and to the northeast, of where we thought that would be the highest probability of expanding the resource, because it's open in all directions. And so that helped answer that compelling question. I call it like a backbone hole, because, the other holes kind of lay off of it. And, now we have a higher confidence, and we're doing something similar with the next hole too. But now that the west is open up, we're doing something similar to the west to test some, compelling questions that we have about the deposit, right?
Yeah. So it tested some newer zones of the pit, and actually at depth, it would be expanding the pit shell. Is that correct? Or is that too deep to be open pit?
Yeah, it's part of it would be below a pit constrained resource, right? But the nice thing about Mocoa too, it has a section of core that's above a 1% that we're looking into the future of even the potential of both a pit constrained resource and a X pit or a potential underground style resource. But the bigger one was to connect up the mineralized zones and understanding the mineralization, because we're not following something small. Like when you drill something that's over 1,000 meters, the entire thing is mineralized. So, how it lays out, where the higher grade sections, it is fairly disseminated, but also we get these very high grade zones in it, and trying to understand how it is all being fed. Sometimes I just think we are trying to describe the elephant grabbing a tail. And really look forward to the day that we can continue to add drills to this and deposit, and really look at it in even a bigger picture.
In hole 44, the high grade section from 295 meters to 362 meters, that grades over 1%. Is that, would that be part of an open pit?
Let me see I need to bring up the same table. There is the 1% section. That would be within an open pit. Absolutely.
Okay.
It's only down 360 meters. So it would. And then the western section obviously had even higher portion. So this is all connecting up as to a really strong core to this core to the deposit. We feel that there's probably multiple cores.
Okay. And then turning to hole 45, which you're drilling now, you said it's 600 meters deep. So good progress there on the second hole of the drill program. What's the objective of that hole? You're stepping out to the west. So is that to test a completely new zone?
No, so I don't, to test some people's memories that were back around in 2022, we drilled a pretty spectacular hole back then. But it was truly trying to find, the feeder system. There is one breccia that is a little bit more prolific than all the rest, that we were trying to understand where it was. But despite being such a spectacular hole, the end of the hole actually got out of the breccia. So this hole is, more, it's west southwest. So it is turned, slightly because there's also, based on geophysics and our geochemistry, it's looking like there could be potentially even an offset to the south and some more, expansion potential that direction. But it was also to try, it's hard to model these breccia zones, but it is to try and see, and get into the depth of that breccia, because all this mineralization is coming from somewhere, and we would like to see where it's coming from, right? Potentially it has a feeder zone, right? And that would really be a game changer for the project. So it's to also provide, answering of compelling questions of the expansion potential to the west and to the south, now that it's, more open. And then we have that potential for expansion there. And then the other one is really trying to find, understand the deeper plumbing of the project.
Okay, got it. So at the end of last year, you put out, an interesting PR. I think it was in November. Yeah, it was in November, where you talked about surface exploration programs across the regional area. I mean, the size of the property, footprint that you have there is absolutely enormous. So it has been barely touched, to date. So can you talk about some of these new target areas across the property package, and will any of those be tested with the drill in this program?
So it's a hard and you're right. It's hard, to get your head around, the potential of this project. We're already at 600 million tons within the existing resource. We're doing this drill program, which is adding 50% more drilling than's ever been drilled on it, with it's really an interim goal of trying to get over that billion ton mark would be our internal goal of what we're trying to do, because that puts it in a new category, right? There's very few projects that are near surface, and of this size and scale, right? And we've talked about that, I think, in others of why that's important, right? But then even around the deposit area, there's some additional targets, and we will be putting out news very soon too on an update of some of that regional work, that helps put that into context, because, just a few kilometers away, there are additional, targets where we have lithocap, or we have, the signatures of intrusives, through, geophysics. And then we'll also have a lot of, soil and rock samples, right? Copper, obviously a main focus, but we also really love moly, because moly doesn't mobilize, and it helps to say, if you find moly at the surface, then you're going to find moly underneath it normally. And it's really, even within the area of the deposit, there's more potential for additional porphyry center discoveries. But on top of that, right, we're sitting on about 75,000 hectares of applications, and it covers about a 75-kilometer portion of the overall trend of the Jurassic, porphyry belt. And to help put that into perspective, right? If you look in Ecuador, which is, also where I started the construction of Mirador. But if you look at Mirador Norte, Finanza, San Carlos, and Morinza, all those deposits, billions and billions and billions of pounds now between all those. Mirador now expanding to 150,000 tons per day. It will be soon one of the largest copper mines in the world. Everybody knows, I believe, of Morinza and its size and scale potential. But those projects are all 75 kilometers between each other. So there is a short-term significant potential in this project. There's a medium term with some of the areas around it, and it's also, has locked up a extremely prolific belt, right? I could even add that directly south of Mirador is Fruta del Norte, right? Which is, one of the largest gold discoveries in the last 20 years too. So it's a very prolific belt. And I see, there's room to create value over an extended period of time. Right now, based on where our valuation, of our company is and our price of, partial cents per pound in the ground, it's really about demonstrating, that scale, size, and that the project is moving forward on a solid base. Because I know that just a re-rating in how our pounds in the ground are evaluated will create a significant amount of value, and hopefully this drilling will speak for itself.
Yeah, and that sort of gets to, I guess, the next part of the conversation, which is the harder part, just based upon the recent price action in the LBC share price. So it's interesting to me because, okay, the market knows the size of the deposit. It knows the average grade. It's been drilled. It's been known for over a decade, right? Since it was drilled by B2 Gold around the 2010 timeframe. Yet, I mean, to have a 15 million market cap in Canada when you have one of the biggest porphyry deposits in Latin America is kind of a stunning contrast. And so the reason why I ask about the exploration targets is because I wonder, I mean, target 8, target 6, target 5, I mean, that's what they were called formerly, 5, 6, 7, 8. They're all pretty tantalizing targets. I mean, yes, they're completely step out, into areas that have not been drilled before, but I would bet you have a couple more porphyry centers there. I would bet pretty big. So why not do some Wildcat holes to try and jar, awake this market that doesn't seem to appreciate what you have already?
It's difficult. I spend probably way too much time trying to understand what's going on. And I feel that, it's more, market. I mean, I obviously was personally very, surprised when we put out our drill hole on January 6th, and then the movement, in the stock, on those days. But I think we're dealing with a market, that, there's a soup of the day, which might be crypto moving, a lot of money moving around different locations. And it doesn't change the overall value of Mocoa and the results that we are getting. So I almost think we're putting in an investment that will bring returns. It might just take more time for it to get the value it deserves. I think the best pathway is just to continue what we're doing because it's lower risk, right? We currently have one drill on the project, looking and hoping to get to a better valuation to be able to mobilize additional drilling and support that higher burn. We're not super far away from it. It's not a huge, gigantic leap, right? So to be able to take a little bit more risk, right? Because drilling into a new target that's never been drilled before always comes with a risk. And when you're drilling 1,000 meters a month, I'm very tempted and have lots of dreams about it, but I think that we are better off staying with what we know can add value, demonstrating how the project can continue to grow, hit some key psychological hurdles, bring attention back, demonstrate that, it's not just a one-off and that we're continuing to drill, we're continuing to advance the project, can create that re-rating, right? If you look at similar projects around the world, they're not partial cents per pound in the ground. They're cents per pound in the ground, right? So even going from where we are, there's a multiple of where our valuation is. So, building credibility back to the project, demonstrating it, get attention back on it, I think is a true and steady path. And once the value starts creating, it opens up a whole lot more pathways of continuing to create value, which is what I like about the project, right? I can see where it can create value in a near term, a medium term, a long term, right? And then overall district, potential, right? And we're really in those first days of it. And so a little bit of patience and discipline, and executing, I think, on a solid plan.
Yeah, I mean, I completely understand what you're saying. I guess to pursue this a little further, just to dig in a little more into management thinking. So right now, based upon the current market cap, which I know you're unhappy with, as are most shareholders, you're being valued at less than a half cent per pound of copper in the ground. So will another 2 billion pounds of copper improve that per pound valuation? Like, what's the path to have the company valued at more than a penny per pound of copper in the ground?
Yeah. And I think it's actually between the 0.2 and 0.3 cents per pound in the ground, right? And we've done a lot of research on this, right? If you look at maybe the top 20 undeveloped copper porphyry projects in the world that are held by a junior or non-producer, there you can see that there's a bifurcation in valuation. And, there's some key, hurdles, but obviously scale and grade are one of them, right? And Mocoa is definitely checking those boxes, right? It's got similar style results. I hate to even do the comparable, but if you look at, NGEX's most recent result, which was a monster hole, which had like 200 meters at a 5%.
Yeah,
But
like
that's
one of
still
the best copper, that was one of the best copper holes I've seen in my life that they put out yesterday.
Yeah, and really it was a gold hole, right? But because that's an equivalent copper grade.
Oh yeah,
But
it
still,
was
I don't want
mostly
to take
gold,
away
right?
from it.
Right.
But that's 1,000 meters at 1%, right? And it's at a $3 billion valuation. Now, if you say that's the same as 1% over 1,000 meters. And if we remember just very long ago, we had at Mocoa, 800 meters at a 0.72. Right. So it's batting like some of the best projects in the world that are just drop dead stunners. And so I think bringing that back, the quality, opening people back up to the quality of the project that Mocoa is going to be a part of that. Right. There's definitely a bifurcation in valuations where some are valued 1, 2, 5, whatever number cents per pound in the ground. But there is a group that's very similar to Mocoa, right? They're all around that 0.2 to 0.3, but in most of the cases, they're not as a quality asset. They might have a total pounds, but they don't have the similar grade. But a bigger one is that they're not moving forward. Right. So, that's where I see that value can be created in Mocoa, just demonstrating the project is moving forward and getting a little bit of wind. Right. And it's not a huge amount of wind. Right. Sometimes I feel like I second guess myself. Maybe we should have tried to get out the results earlier than January, where it was, all the thinking was on crypto and inaugurations, and there was maybe a lack of attention in market and the space. But it doesn't take away that the project is an amazing asset. We have a team that's actually, got big projects across the finish line. We have sponsorship. And we are moving the project forward, and every day are being able to demonstrate that there's a political will being developed within Colombia. And so that will, and we get a couple kicks at the can, right? We have, probably, if things go well and productivity keeps up, maybe 20 days left in the drilling on this next hole, and then we're off to the next hole. And be able to once again, some projects put out some amazing holes, but it seems like, Mocoa consistently puts out, really, really, really solid values because it's an amazing deposit. And so eventually it will, create some significant momentum.
So 14,000 meters, the first hole was over 1,100 meters. You're targeting 1,200 meters in this hole. So is this about a 10 or 11 hole program in total?
No, the other holes are around 750 meters or shorter, right?
Okay.
So these are more, I call them backbones because they're from the location and go along into the larger mineralized extensions. Even if they're at deep, they have a connection up at some of the nearer surface. So it's really help uh, create more certainty in our expansion, right? And so the other ones are going to be not as long, and we'll make up our mind based on the results of how things look on this hole, whether or not okay, let's move straight, or do we continue to understand the deeper plumbing and geology of the project? I mean, it's it's hard when the entire hole is mineralized, right? I mean, it's getting your head around something like that. So it's like, where did it come from? It's everywhere, right? So it's a good problem to have, right? I'm not going to cry to anyone, right? I love this project, but I also want to give it the attention and do it in the best we possibly can, right? So
Yeah,
we're a little bit, maybe a little perfectionist in that aspect.
it's a good problem to have, but that's what porphyries are. There's copper, moly, and sometimes gold all throughout the ore body, and it's just usually lower or not super high grade. Um, so really there's two ways to add value from my perch. And that is either you find some really high grade zones, which are quite a bit higher than the average grade of the ore body today, or you find more copper and moly that's near surface that you can add to the open pit shell. Uh, are those the two objectives of this program?
I also think that 1 billion ton mark is an important psychological number for market. It puts you in a category by yourself. It's not, I call it psychological, but it's also reasonable, right? Because if you look at the supply demand of what the world needs in terms of copper, we've really milked out, there's some really special things, and I really encourage everybody to go and read BHP's report on copper. It's got so much interesting information. But the big one for me too was that in the past, it was more expensive to do greenfields than brownfields. But then in the most recent decade, brownfields expansion projects became more expensive, right? The easy stuff is gone. They've milked out these brownfields, but there's been a lot of money even spent on expansion and exploration drilling, but no real discoveries, right? I think it was in 30 years, there's been 250 and only 5 made within the last decade. And it's something like that, right? So there's not a lot of really high quality projects. And while BHP has done an acquisition, it's not let's be honest, Filo de Sol is not a near-term production scenario, or at least down into the best part of that project. It's not something that's happening overnight. And that there's very few really quality size and scale projects. So when the days come, and they will come, right? And maybe it's not the majors. Maybe once again, it's China, or maybe it's a new nation, or maybe it's now the United States because they're worried about creating production chains once again and moving forward. But they're going to want projects that really make a difference, right? And so having scale is important, right? And it helps classify you into a different category. So I also believe that will be an important medium term catalyst for the company, right? Where I believe demonstrating the project is moving forward, really strong results, continue to demonstrate that mineralization is starting from surface, not our best mineralization, but it is mineralization, and it's a lot of it would be mineable. So you have a near surface deposit, but then we will be looking at doing a resource update based on this end of this drilling program, right? To also redemonstrate, right, and hit it, and just continuing to hit. I think things that really create value, and that's the nice thing. It's doable as long as we can maintain fuel in the tank.
Okay. I get your plan and I understand it. I completely understand it, especially when finances are tighter. But I will encourage you, Ian, as a shareholder and somebody who, wants to see the company do well, if some more money comes into the treasury at some point later this year or next year, to take a look at some of those Wildcat targets, because I think they can really capture the imagination of the market. And drilling, 2, 3, 4 holes, yeah, it's a risk. It costs money. You have a chance of drilling total dusters, but for some reason, I feel like they won't be total dusters. I feel like there could be a new discovery made that could really help to capture the market's attention. So I'll just throw my 2 cents in there. It's not worth more than 2 cents. And then let's talk about the finances, because obviously finances are important when you're drilling 14,000 meters. You got to pay for the program. So yesterday you announced an ATM. The market didn't respond favorably. So what's your thinking now in terms of funding the company?
I will address that. But I would like to let you know that within the last version of the 14,000 meter program, we did have a couple holes to test some of the additional targets. And even if, a second drill being mobilized, we would definitely be including testing some of these additional targets. And we are strongly looking at them. And maybe I'll give a little bit. And because it's not overly material, because it's similar to some of the stuff we've seen in the past, but even in some of the non-target areas and the connection between those targets, we're seeing very strong mineralization at surface. We're seeing, lithocap at surface. We're seeing rocks that look like they just came out of the same resource area at Mocoa as you work, towards those. So, it is exciting. And I do believe, it won't be, they're higher probability. And so it's definitely part of our, program to add that in too. So next
That's great to
on
hear.
the concept on, again, but for me, it's the catalyst is being able to, bring in a second drill. At a second drill, then our burn rate will be up to about $1 million Canadian a month with 2 drills. And getting it to about 2,000 meters a month. And so that's a higher burn. It's a more efficient burn because more dollars, are going into drilling instead of, other things. But, so I'd like to get to that point as soon as possible. I really believe it's a project that deserves to have 8 drills turning on it, right? And hopefully we can get there. So in terms of financing, right? I guess I was personally hoping that there would be a little bit better reaction in market on our first results. It is what it is. That's the life, and we'll continue to hopefully be able to stimulate, through the actions we're taking on the ground. The ATM was put into place. We've traditionally had one, right? And you normally do a base shelf and they have a life of 25 months. We updated the base shelf, which allows us to do a prospectus-based financing, which was the last financing we did. And it's normally just a normal, the filing for then the, modification, the supplement, to the base shelf to add in a ATM facility. Right. Perhaps, poor timing, and people got ahead of themselves and was filed, with, regulators, and immediately you have to put out a press release, and maybe timing could have been better, but it doesn't mean that the facility is being used, right? It is a tool in the toolkit, right? That allows you to, for me, it's a tool that allows you more flexibility in your timing of finances, right? So that I'm not forced to do a highly dilutive financing just to keep, things moving forward. And it's not being used. So although it was painful, perhaps the reaction and looking at the daily trading, it seemed like individual. But it is a very good tool when it's used properly. And I want to make sure that it's clear that it's not being used today, right? It is a facility that's in place and allows it to be used, and when it's used properly, doesn't cap an upside like a very dilutive financing, right? Or a heavy warrant financing. So it's nice to have in place, even though maybe, timing and messaging was missed.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get why you did it. I understand that it's something to have in your back pocket in case you need it, but obviously the market did not like it. I don't know exactly all the market's thinking, because obviously the market is many minds with many incentives and many, reasons to sell, shares that could have nothing to do with the company at all. But obviously the timing of the price action is curious. And maybe the market is thinking that, hey, we want to see more drill results, and then we'll see if we want to give you more money. Don't try to get more money before we get more results. What's your thought about that?
It's a fair comment, right? Because in retrospect, right, basically was following an administrative steps to put something into place, and it timed a release and realized, we now have to release this. That the intent was, it wouldn't be used until more results are out anyways, right? So in retrospect, that was a lesson learned, right? I can also say, though, that if people that watched the trading, it wasn't it was a block, right? We got hit by a block, and maybe it was because of the ATM, or maybe it was because some other reason, like somebody needed some liquidity. I don't know what the reason was, right? So can't go into the psychology of individual people. I know that it wasn't well received, and it's definitely a lesson learned, but it's also a powerful facility if it's used properly. And the idea, of course, we're 20 days away from or maybe a little more, to getting out this next hole, and delivering more results.
All right, let's open the floor. We'll take one question from the audience. If somebody has a question for Ian, keep it on topic, on the company, drill results, planning, et cetera, et cetera. And then I'll just ask you a question about the country and President Petro. Ian, what's the mood there on the ground? When is the next federal election? And which way is the wind blowing?
So this is an interesting conversation, and I'm going to start it with a preface that I was in the elections of Hugo Chavez, of Evo Morales, and Rafael Correa, and then in Petro, right? And for me, what's most important is believing that projects take many, many years, can go through multiple presidencies. So it's all about that triangle of being extremely strong on the ground, people feeling part of the project, building a national reputation, and that will drive long-term political will. But also to understand that there's windows. And in Ecuador, right, there was a window that got Mirador built and got Fruta del Norte built. And then afterwards, guess what? No more mines got built, right? So it was a window and it was an opportunity, and that was at a time. And I learned you have to be able to bring something to the plate when it is needed, right? So if we look at the current landscape in Colombia, Petro can only run for one term. Elections would be coming up in August of 2006. Correct? Yeah, 2026. So a little less than 2 years from now. And then the new presidency would start in November of 2026. And Petro, although very supportive of energy transition, et cetera, he is obviously not the most friendly to private investment, more of believes more in the public sector, et cetera. But he has not been very popular, which is, I think, is an indicator that's on the wall. So the expectations is there will be a swing in the next upcoming elections. And I think you see it through South America too. You look at Ecuador and Honduras and Argentina, probably the most notable. And there's a swing back to create jobs, stability, move things forward, a more pragmatic approach than an idealistic approach. Right. So my goal is to make sure that Mocoa is got enough criticality around it in terms of a project, right? That when that does happen, that we are saying, hey, this is an opportunity to attract significant investment into your country. And so that's the way I think of it. And those are the, oh, did I cut off? Because my phone started ringing. Am I back now?
Nope. No, I can hear you.
Okay, sorry, because my phone started ringing. That is the way my brain thinks, right? I even had it at VRIC, a question on jurisdictions, et cetera. I think jurisdiction is more of where people feel good, right? And they think they understand a jurisdiction, but I like to develop situations where you can define your own destiny. And I think that Colombia is setting up. I think there's a reason that Rio Tinto and Freeport-McMoRan and others of the largest copper guys are now in Colombia, setting up offices in Colombia and preparing for the same moment that I'm describing.
And Frank Zustra, right?
Also correct. Yeah. He was there before, right? He helped co-found Eris, so he's got a long history there, and I think also understands how that is all playing out in country.
Final question, Ian. This has been a great conversation. Thank you for the time. What are your conversations like with Frank? Is he involved with the management of the company, the planning? Do you think that he's a long-term investor who will continue to participate in financing, in the future?
So I'm going to start off with, for those that know me, I'm a mining engineer, right? And while I apply that knowledge to how markets work, it's a bottom up type focus, right? Focus on the project, how to create value through that project, and what catalysts or underpins valuations, right? That's the way my brain thinks. So having someone, Frank, who thinks of it from a different perspective and looks in terms more of even a bigger picture of how this could grow into something much larger, and be able to turn it from a project into a company is an interesting perspective. Just sat down. I'm in Vancouver, sat down with Frank yesterday, right? And he brings that to the table. And I think what the big one is when he is a reporting issuer, right? It's a key denominator, right? That, and on the last financing, he maintained his position. So he sees it as a long-term. It is his copper vehicle today. And it sees a bigger picture and a little bit more down the horizon in terms of what's happening in the world and some of the conversations he's had around the planet, especially in the Middle East, of what, the world is looking for and why, Libero and its size and scale and Mocoa size and scale potential and a expertise in actually advancing and getting things across the finish line was an important part of that. And it's also the reason why I know that, have that knowledge on the valuations of other projects, because we are looking at that constantly and understanding where the growth can come into a bigger picture.
All right. No questions from the audience. Thank you, Ian. Have a good weekend, everyone. This conversation will be up on my YouTube, Goldfinger Capital, by Monday morning. Cheers. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.